Mishkoze.
Watsatste.
Via Shake.
We are strong.
Welcome to Toronto Council Fire's Anti-Human and Sex Trafficking podcast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 4 of our podcast. We welcome our listeners to the We Are Strong podcast. This podcast was created by Toronto Council Fire Native Cultural Centre, and our goal is to increase and provide awareness in human trafficking of Indigenous persons. We aim to do this by developing this podcast with in-depth conversations, prevention, continuing support, information, sharing resources, and speakers to our communities, friends, and families. We hope that this will guide them in being aware and safely addressing the broad spectrum of human trafficking issues related to the impacts of our community. Today we have an anonymous guest joining us. But first, my name is Shante Toulouse, and this is my co-host, Mary.
Hi everyone, my name is Mary. I am the Youth Wellness Education Navigator here at Council Fire, and I'd like to thank you again for joining us. Before we begin, the topics that we will be discussing are sensitive and may be triggering to some people. We are available afterwards to provide supports and resources in case you feel triggered by what you hear on this podcast. You can find these supports listed on our podcast website. So this is a trigger warning as we will be mentioning incidences of sexual violence, human trafficking, and intergenerational trauma. Thank you. And we shall start our questions. All right, so first and foremost, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a mother. I'm a proud mother. I have 2 children. I come from the West Coast. I'm of mixed ancestry, and I'm just trying to be the best mom I can be to my children.
Thank you. And how was human trafficking introduced to your life?
Oh. Okay. Well, I was born into a very dysfunctional family. I've seen a lot of stuff as a child that I probably shouldn't have seen. So did my siblings. I saw a lot of drug abuse. As children, were abused in many ways, from sexual to physical to mental. And I guess, I was introduced to the streets because I was looking for a sense of belonging, what I didn't have at home. I guess I was in search of a family or, wanting to belong, to feel loved, to feel wanted, which I didn't have at home, which it was lacking. And then I became a troubled kid from everything I seen at home. And I thought, or I wanted better. So I started running away and, meeting up with other street kids. And they gave me a sense of belonging because they were just like me. A lot of them went through stuff very similar to me. So I felt like I belonged, like they didn't judge me. And I'd run away, and I started hanging downtown Calgary. And there's a lot of runaways in Calgary. And there was this drop-in center that we were able to go into to like change our clothes, exchange our clothes, take a shower, get sandwiches. They would hook you up with some services. We were able to make phone calls, just have a place that was warm to go into out of the elements. At this time I was like sleeping on park benches and, in parks and stuff like that. And I met these girls there, and they were like me, all like ragged clothes and dirty clothes and, just trying to make it. And so I seen them, they started like looking nice, and their hair was done and their makeup, and they had clean clothes, and they just looked completely different than when I had originally met them. And so it piqued my interest. I was young and I was like, wow, this looks so lovely at the time. And so we used to go to the mustard seed as well in Calgary, and they would feed all the homeless or street people there. And these girls had already started working, which at the time I was not really aware of, or I didn't quite understand what they were doing. And me hanging out around the mustard seed, I was 12 and a half, 13. That's where the pimps really target in Calgary. They really target these kind of shelters where vulnerable people go, vulnerable girls go, because it's easy to find them, very easy to target them there. And we're in such vulnerable situations that we fall for it. We believe it. So these girls introduced me to, I guess, their pimp. It would be their pimp. But at the time, I was told like their boyfriend. And they introduced me, and I was okay with it at the time because I was like, okay, this is all I have to do to make money, and I'll be okay. And I didn't think anything was really wrong with it at the time because, I mean, as a child, I was used sexually, so it just became that it was okay. So yeah, they introduced me. They took me and they got me clothes and makeup, nice clothes that I'd never had before. Makeup. They got my hair done and nails done and made me look pretty. Um, and that right there, it got me. It like hooked me because I'd never had that. I'd never had luxury. Growing up, I had to worry about, sometimes not eating. And, by doing this, I didn't have to have those worries anymore. And I wasn't hurting anyone but myself, which I didn't realize at that time. But I didn't think I was hurting anybody. So I just did it. And that's pretty much how I got into it. And from there, you get passed around. You can be sold, you can be put on charge. Um, if that pimp doesn't want you or you're not making enough money and somebody else wants you, they can pay a charge and take you over. But that's pretty much how I got introduced to it.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. That truly is something very deep. The next question is, if you're okay, why have you personally chosen to share your story?
Well, I feel it's important to share my story because, if I can help one other girl, one other woman, or one young girl that's so naive like I was, and I can share my story and it helps them to avoid all the pain and suffering that I went through in that industry, I want to, because I had nobody to help me. I had nobody sharing their stories with me, and there wasn't resources like there is now. There's a much more resources now than there was in 1992 and 93. So that is why I want to share my story, plus help me on my healing journey.
The next question is, why might it be important to share one story with others?
Well, it's important to share your story with others, and it's hard at the same time because society looks at us like we're whores, that we're not humans, that we're not women, that we're not somebody's daughter, mother, sister. They look at us like we're less than, when really we're not. We're just trying to survive with what we've been given. And I feel like more girls need to share their story so society sees us as people, as humans, that we were just working with what we were given. And that they need to have a better understanding that we don't deserve that. Just because we're in that lifestyle doesn't mean we deserve everything that happened to us and the way people treat us. So that's why I feel that is very important.
Thank you. When have you felt the most understood or even seen for sharing your story to empower others?
I felt very empowered by a lot of women um, in the community at one point. And I was doing so well. And I was sharing my story, and I felt empowered. And I felt strong because I had these supports. But the problem with many of our organizations is that they will use you for your story, and then they toss you aside with no resources and leave you back in a vulnerable situation, which then can put you back into that lifestyle. It's very triggering. It basically brings you back to being a child again, and it triggers abandonment issues, the self-worth, the needing and wanting love. So it all kind of goes together. So at one point I did feel very empowered. Um, and I'm back on that healing journey again. So yeah.
Thank you. And it's a real issue as you address. So I'm wondering too, what kind of supports do you think community needs to provide for women and others who are being trafficked?
There needs to be many more supports put in place. Um, when I was exiting, trying to find housing, like permanent housing, long-term housing was very important. Safe housing where nobody could find me, or I wouldn't, run into people that I knew from that lifestyle. Or transitional housing, because some women don't know how to live on their own, right? They've always been with somebody or around somebody, so they don't know how to, let's say pay rent or go get an apartment on their own and stuff like that, or build their credit to be able to do that. Because when you're on the streets, you're not thinking of credit or any those things that you need nowadays to be able to sustain yourself. Um, Another big problem is when you reach out to services, these services judge you. They're not supposed to, but they do, and they're quick to report. So, as a woman, as a mother, how do you reach out for help when your children might be taken from you, or the thought of your children might be taken from you because you're Indigenous and you work, or you were caught up in that lifestyle? So the minute you say you come from the streets or you're involved in that life and they know there's kids involved, the first thing they do is call Children's Services or Native Child. So, you know, that's a big factor. Like, how do we come forward? How can we reach out for help if we're going to be judged and reported? How can we share our stories? So there has to be a better system put in place or better training, to understand us women and girls, because yes, we all came from the same industry and the same, lifestyle, but our stories are all unique. Like, they're different, but similar, but they're different in many ways, right? So it's just, I think, better training across the board. Um, School supports, doctors, psychologists, counselors. That's not as easy as you think it is to find without judgment. So that's where I feel like there's a huge part missing.
Thank you. What resources were helpful to you when you needed it?
There was a few resources available. In the 90s, there was not like there is now. Evergreen Brickworks was like a youth street kind of drop-in. They were pretty supportive to us. There was a church group that came around and they would provide us with condoms. If you were a drug user, they'd provide you with clean needles and stuff like that. They would also bring these little booklets out of bad date reports. So that helped us a lot in a lot of ways to make sure we didn't get in certain cars. And then there was a program called Streetlight that when you would be arrested or busted for prostitution or communication or solicitation, that they would offer you diversion program. So instead of us having to do jail time, because we weren't hurting anybody but ourselves, they really fought for us to be able to go. It was called Hooker School and John School, and Streetlight. They ran this program for quite a few years, and basically it was a diversion program so that we wouldn't carry a criminal record for something that, you know, we were doing that really we shouldn't be punished for because we were already punishing ourselves.
I'm glad that you had some support available. The next question is, what resources are available now that you would recommend?
There's so many gaps in our organizations right now that it's hard to recommend certain things when our organizations don't communicate with one another. So from my experience, with some organizations, like I said before, they'll use you for your story and then they toss you aside. So it's hard for me to recommend certain places because, I don't want girls or women to go through what I went through after that, because it could have easily pushed me back into that lifestyle if I wasn't as far on my healing journey as I am. So there is a lot of good organizations out there though, but the problem is they don't communicate with one another and they don't work together with one another. So there's major gaps in between. Some organizations might get funding for one thing and then another might get funding for another thing, but they're kept so separate. But if they were to merge and work together, they could reach so many more and do so much more for these women and girls. That's not being done right now. And it's all really a lack of communication.
Thank you. I'm wondering as well, especially regarding the difficulties that you shared with sharing your story, what advice you might have for anyone who wants to share their story or don't know how to.
Well, by sharing your story, it definitely helps you on your healing journey. It definitely opens up a lot of wounds, which are very painful and hurtful, and you have to relive some of them. But by reliving some of them, you're also healing. As much as that hurts and it's painful and it feels like it's ripping you apart, it's also releasing everything you've been holding inside, right? So you're releasing some of the shame, some of the guilt. It doesn't ever fully go away, I don't think so. But yeah, by sharing their story, one, it's empowering. Two, it's going to push them on their healing journey. It's definitely done that for me. It keeps pushing me further and further out of my comfort zone, right? You get very comfortable, so then you shut down. But once you're pushed out of that comfort zone a bit and you get started with sharing your story and you feel empowered, you just want to go further and further and further. So that's why I feel it's important to share your story.
Thank you. And looking back at your life and looking at where you are now, who would you say has had the most impact on your life?
I'd have to say it would be my firstborn child. That was the first time in my whole life that I'd ever felt love, what unconditional love was. I didn't know you could love another human being so much. And it was him that, made me want more and realize that, I have this little human that needs me and loves me, and I have to do better and be better for him. And so I'd have to say it was him.
That's so beautiful. Can you describe the areas or scenarios of human trafficking?
Well, there's many different areas with human trafficking. It's happening right before your eyes. And a lot of people don't even realize it's happening right in front of their eyes. There's strip clubs, there's massage parlors, there's the streets, which are known as the strolls or the traps. There's the internet, which is huge nowadays. The hotels, Airbnbs, short-term rentals, because they're easy to rent for in-call services. In different scenarios that can put you in. Well, there's so many different scenarios like that could get you caught up in it. I mean, poverty, lack of resources, education, mental health, addictions, or coming from a dysfunctional family, looking for a sense of belonging. There's so many different scenarios. So those are a few of the areas and scenarios that can get you caught up very easily.
Thank you for sharing those with us. What has supported you, or maybe who has supported you, and what supports do you believe are needed for women who are trying to exit human trafficking?
Well, to get out of it, it's very hard. For me, I can't say I fully got out of it. I got away from the pimps, and I went more independent working in the strip clubs, due to the fact that I had no education. I had nothing to sustain me to be able to go get a job. And yeah, I went more into the strip clubs, massage parlors and stuff, and went into independently. But for girls seeking to leave, they have to truly want it. Because if they're not ready, they are going to go back. Because that happened to me many times, trying to exit and do something else. But I kept getting pulled back because a lack of education, a lack of certain things that I can't provide for myself. So that's what kind of keeps you in it. To exit it, I have to say you really want to. You have to be at that point where you've had enough, because human trafficking, prostitution, it's an addiction. It truly is an addiction. I know that sounds very bizarre and weird, but it's no different than a drug addiction, because you need that money. You need to be able to survive. You need to take care of your kids. You need to do this. So where can you go get that money? Selling yourself,
All right, so our next question is, why do you think Indigenous women, trans, two-spirit peoples are more likely to go missing or murdered, encounter human trafficking, or experience violence?
Well, I believe we're more likely to go missing due to the fact that society looks at us less than, first off. And it's due to a lot of intergenerational trauma that's been passed down that our blood memory remembers. And, something that my grandmother went through that, I didn't go through, I have blood memory of that, which sometimes puts us in vulnerable situations where we probably shouldn't be in, but we do get ourselves in. And, when we make a report or somebody reports us missing, do the police take it serious? They don't, because they look at us like, well, they're just whores. They put themselves in that position, or, that lifestyle of drugs. They're basically doing it to themselves, but they don't understand why we're in those situations. None of them ask us why or how we ended up there and what can they do to help. No, they don't. So I feel that that's a big factor why we go missing, because when we do go missing, nobody takes it seriously. And, a lot of women are missing for long periods of time before the police do even take a report. So there's a big barrier with the police, I believe, because that's where it starts. It starts with them. They're the ones that first take the reports when we do go missing. Yeah.
Speaking on the role, or speaking on intergenerational trauma, what role might the cycle of intergenerational trauma play in the Mmiw movement?
It plays a huge part, as a lot of trafficked girls end up dead. They end up murdered. They're getting in cars with men that they don't know. You don't know what car you're getting into. You don't know if they have a weapon in that car. You don't know when they take you to a certain location, if somebody else is waiting, if you're going to be gang raped or, jumped, robbed, held, there's so many possibilities that can happen in those situations. And so I really feel like, the Mmiw and human trafficking, it merges together majorly. Because if you're human trafficked and nobody's looking for you, then if you go missing, who's going to notice you're missing? So, I believe they kind of flow together in many ways, because that lifestyle puts you at risk.
Yeah, this is such like a major topic, especially in the community. So, one question we wanted to ask is, how can non-Indigenous people best support the Mmiw movement?
They can support in many, many ways. They need to be more aware, because it's happening, like I said before, it's happening right in front of people's faces. But because it's not happening to them or one of their family members or one of their daughters, their nieces, their sisters, they don't care. They turn a blind eye. It's not until it hits somewhere as close to home do people start to really care.
So touching on what you mentioned, human trafficking, especially amongst Indigenous women, trans and two-spirited folks, is occurring whether or not people like to see it happening or are willing to see it happening. So do you have any advice for individuals who may know someone involved in human trafficking, or how can individuals help someone who is currently or at risk of being human trafficked?
Well, first, like I said before, every girl's situation is going to be different, from similar but different. So you have to really be cautious in how you approach them, first off, because first instinct is to shut down. Second, if you approach them in the wrong way and somebody's watching, you could put them in a vulnerable situation when they go home that night. Their pimp could beat them up, or even worse, kill them. So you have to be very cautious in how you approach them. They also need a plan. Like, When you're caught up in it, your pimp 9 out of 10 times has your ID, all your identification. So you don't have a bank card, you don't have no money, you have no ID. Usually your cell phone will be taken, or, so how do you reach out for help? There has to be a better plan put forward in the sense of when a girl is trying to leave, who do they contact? How do they leave? If they want to run away and they have a chance to run out the apartment, once they run, where do they go? Usually you're running out with the clothes on your back. So where do you go, right? How do you get help? How do you get away from there? How do you make a phone call? You're not going to call 911 because there's a barrier between us and the police. So we don't trust them, right? So there has to be a better plan in place with the organizations, or a database, or some type of call-in system. If they call a certain number from a payphone, it's free, and they can get a taxi chip or something of those to get to a safe place, and then go from there, right?
Yes, I think what you're sharing, you're raising some critical points as to how can we best support these people who are at risk or currently being human trafficked without inflicting additional harm, and how we can best support them. So in particular, for Indigenous women, trans, and two-spirited people, what kind of precautions can they take to protect themselves?
Well, there's many precautions that they can take. People need to be aware of what grooming looks like. People are very unaware of what grooming looks like. I wasn't unaware of what grooming was when I was being groomed the whole time. And I think they need to be, hotels need to be trained. Airbnb owners that are renting out Airbnbs need to have some type of policy in place too. These hotel managers, the police, like, there's so many areas that need to be touched on that don't work together. And they don't understand what grooming is, or how a girl might be trafficked. There's young girls walking in these hotels, and you can't tell me that the owners or the managers don't see that they're young girls, So, I was one of those young girls. I worked in so many hotels and strip clubs and different places when I was not 18, and I visibly was a little girl. Physically, mentally, looking at my body, you knew I was a little girl, but they still let me work. So I think training across the board, it's hotels, it's club owners, it's massage parlors, it's everyday society, doctors even, you know, doctors are supposed to help you, but in a lot of ways they judge you, and they don't look for certain signs that are visible. I had to go to the hospital many times from being beaten up and assaulted, and nothing came of it because of the lifestyle that I was living. So it makes it okay for that to happen to me because of the lifestyle I was in. But if it happened to a white woman or somebody from mainstream society, it would be taken serious. She would get all the support she needs. So that's where I see a big factor.
It really is evident that everyone takes such a big role in stopping this, or even instigating these situations from happening. And I'm very sorry that this happened to you. So if you could go back in time and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would you tell yourself?
Well, that's a really great question. If I could take what I know now and apply it to then, I can't say I would have necessarily been caught up in the trafficking, but I can't say that I wouldn't have been still caught up in the prostitution. because it was the only way that I knew how to support myself without stealing, robbing, or hurting anybody else. And it was the only way I knew how to get money to be able to have a roof over my head or a hotel room for the night, or, so, but I think if I could go back, I you know, would have gone independently, because I can't say that I wouldn't have still got caught up in it because of how my childhood was and how I got pushed around and stuff. So I can't say that I wouldn't have fully gotten caught up in it, but I would have been more independent.
That's really interesting of you to say. So how do you feel we as a community can better educate the public about human trafficking and Mmiw G2S?
Well, we need to have more places that are non-judgmental, open-hearted, clean heart, to listen to us, and to understand that, each of us has a different story. And it comes down to like the social workers, the psychologists, how they treat us or how they make us feel, really affects how much we open up and how much of the story we share. Again, it comes down to being judged. Are they going to report me? Are they going to come apprehend my children? And then my children go into the system like many other Indigenous children, right? So I think it's better training all around to know if, that woman or girl is in crisis, pre-crisis, post-crisis, and what her individual need is in that moment.
So as you mentioned, everyone's story with human trafficking is vastly different, even though there are quite a few similarities. But looking back on your experiences as a survivor of human trafficking, is there a safety plan that you have created for yourself that you or anyone else could refer to in times of need?
For me, my safety plan really has been working on myself. Um, I know I have to look back in the past to work through my healing journey, but I'm really not trying to look back in my past. I'm trying to just keep it moving forward, because that's what's working for me. So basically, it's just really working on myself, learning to love myself, learning to know my values, my self-worth, which is a continuous battle because society does beat you down. Um, so you have a lot of, issues in the sense of, are you worthy enough? Are you, good enough? So for me, it's my healing journey that's really my safety plan and helping me, and just keeping my supports in place with my healers, and, seeking my medicines and using my medicines and doing ceremony has really been my savior and my safety plan.
Thank you for sharing. And I think a lot of people could resonate with the idea of, as much as your past is a part of you, that looking to your future is what's giving you that strength to keep moving forward. And I know we've touched on this previously, but how do different sectors of society, so, community, family, education, justice systems, health services, how do they all intersect to support the Mmiw movement? And are there sectors in particular that you feel could improve their approach in supporting Mmiw?
Yes, in so many ways, like judgment is a major factor. And almost all of these mainstream agencies, they are quick to report. The police, well, I mean, how do we trust them? And which ones do we trust when a lot of them abuse their powers? A lot of them pick up us working girls and make us give free services to them. So we're not arrested. So how do we know who we can trust and who we can't trust when they're abusing their power? So I think overall, it comes down to training, and having that open heart and open mind is a major factor. And again, it comes back to police. Police is a major issue. Because me as a little girl working out there was a task force named Juvenile Task Force. Do you think they picked me up and took me home? They didn't. They left me out there. So, do they really care? Or is it just, a job for them?
You spoke before about how your son has played a big role in helping you ease out of that lifestyle. So my question is, knowing what you know now, or knowing what you know, how do you raise your children in order to protect them?
To be honest, my children don't know my past of that lifestyle. I was able to keep it separate. Like, I'm not there on my healing journey yet to be able to share that with my children or put that burden on my children. I don't want to pass down the intergenerational trauma from that to them. So right now, I'm not there on my healing journey to be able to share that with my children. I feel like keeping it from them is the best way to protect them and keep them sheltered.
So was there ever a turning point in your life that brought you forward to to the healing journey?
Yes, it was my children. When I got sick, I was scared to leave my kids without anybody to care for them, as I don't have any family. And the thought of them going into, you know, mainstream systems or native child or, that put the fear of God into me. And I just realized at that point that I really needed to take the time with them because it might be the last time that I had left with them. So yeah, that's what really changed me.
Thank you for sharing. I think a lot of people can also relate that their children give them strength and give them that extra push to move forward. And in your healing journey, and as we know, it's just that, it's a journey. What is the largest obstacle that you've had to overcome?
The largest obstacle I've had to overcome, well, it's ongoing. I mean, like I said before, prostitution is an addiction in a way, because I know that, okay, I can go get this money and provide better for my children financially and give them everything I didn't have and give them a better childhood and life that I didn't have. But I think the obstacles are gonna forever be ongoing. I don't think my journey is ever gonna stop in that way because it is an addiction. I battle it every day. Um, the thought of struggling financially or, not struggling, but I've chose to struggle financially. And I'm learning to love myself. And I'm learning that money's not everything and that there's so many more important things than money, um, like the time with my children.
Thank you for being so open and vulnerable with us. And as you mentioned, it's a healing journey. And I think that takes off a lot of pressure off of people that once they enter this journey, that it's a quick fix of some sort and that the pain will end. But as you mentioned, it's ongoing and you're constantly going through this process of reliving trauma, overcoming trauma, and on this journey of self-love as well. Looking back as to when you were a younger woman or a girl, how has your healing journey evolved since you were young to now as a grown woman?
Well, it's been huge. I mean, like I said before, I still have a long ways to go. I don't think my healing journey is, fully going to ever end, but it is getting better. I am becoming stronger. Um, I'm learning to love myself. I'm learning my self-worth. Um, I'm learning to embrace what I did go through because it's made me the person I am today. I'm learning to embrace my voice, which I didn't have before. Um, Financially, I have a lot less money, but I have a lot more self-worth now. Um, it's allowing, like, my healing journey has allowed me to grow in many different ways that I never thought that I could grow. I always thought of myself as, just, a dumb working girl, not really worth anything to anybody. And, I had some lovely ladies that pushed me out of my comfort zone and got me started on my healing journey. And I've just been running full-fledged ahead with it. And, it took me getting sick and almost dying to realize the value of things, not money value, but personal values. And that's what really made me change my life, and go on this journey. And now sharing my story, I hope that it empowers, these girls, these women, that they're not alone and that it's okay to speak up and use your voice. And by using your voice, you can help empower other women or other girls and, be a support system for them also. And, just getting that story out there and sharing it and to better educate people that we are humans too. Just because we were in that lifestyle doesn't make me any less valuable than you, the next person, or the next person. I'm somebody's mom, I'm somebody's daughter, I'm somebody's sister, I'm somebody's auntie, and I'm a human. So I want other girls to know that, some people will look at us a certain way, and then there's others that will help us on our journey, that will, support us and, help us learn to love ourselves and use our voice in a good way and in a positive way, and to, support one another and empower is, big factor of it, right? Um, so yeah, with that being said, I just hope that if there's, any other girls out there that are in a similar situation, that, they use their voice, they use it in a good way, and they share their story to help, other young girls that are being trafficked or caught up in a situation and don't know how to exit or don't know resources to exit. Maybe, us girls that are further on our healing journey can help these other women reach out or find resources that they can access that, is more available now than there was before. So I hope by me sharing my story that, it brings a little bit of light to somebody else to know that they're not alone, that, many other women have gone through that and can understand what they're going through and understand, everything that comes with it, the fear, the new beginnings, the past, the traumas. Um, so yeah, with that being said, I hope that, I could touch at least one other girl, one other human, and I hope it empowers them to use their voice. Mmiw.
I would just like to say thank you again on behalf of Toronto Council Fire for sharing your story, and foremost recognizing that, it's not your responsibility to share your story, and that by sharing your story, you are reliving those traumas. It does take a toll on you, but the fact that you're willing to gift us with your knowledge and your experiences in hopes that it can help other girls is absolutely amazing. It takes great courage and strength. And I know I'm profoundly impacted by this conversation today. I'm sure others listening are as well. And I'd like to thank you, and I'll pass it over to Shantae for some closing remarks.
Yes, your story is just so raw and beautiful and just inspirational. And I'm really happy that you're having this opportunity to share it with so many other people and teach them what you know. And I just wanted to really just say thank you. Just thank you for being on this podcast. We just really appreciate it.